here. Today I'm going to show you how to make this delicious chuck eye steak over a bed of sauteed string beans and grape tomatoes. Look at this beautiful pan-fried steak. It is very similar in taste and texture to a ribeye, but at a fraction of the cost. Look at that marbling. It almost looks like a boneless ribeye. Let's get to cooking. These are our basic ingredients. We have our chuck eye steak. It is $9.99 a pound. A year or so ago, this was actually $6.99 a pound. I remember that specifically because that's a great price compared to ribeye. We have our grape tomatoes and string beans, and then we have black pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, seasoning salt, and oxtail seasoning. I love using this on any red meat. So it has 220 milligrams of sodium per quarter teaspoon serving. This is good to marinate or season your meat before you cook it with sea salt, red pepper, thyme, celery seed, allspice, paprika, and sugar. It is very delicious if you've never used it. I am using liquid smoke. I'm also using coconut aminos. I use coconut aminos in place of soy sauce. It doesn't taste exactly the same. It's a bit sweeter, but if you have an allergy to soy or any reason you don't want to use it, definitely give this product a try. I bought this one from Trader Joe's, but you can also order it online from Amazon. I have my other cooking utensils to dry my steak and a colander to rinse my vegetables. So the first thing I'm going to do is wash my steak. This is USDA ground choice Angus beef. I definitely wash my steaks before I cook them. Some people may not. Look at that beautiful marbling. You can see how thick the steak is. It is extremely tender. Not as tender as beef tenderloin, but you'll see when we start to cook it how soft it actually is. So I just give it a rinse and make sure there aren't any gunk or gritty pieces on it, and then I sit it on a paper towel. Look at that beautiful red meat. For all you red meat lovers. This is not a bad buy at $9.99 a pound. It's extremely flavorful with that fat marbling in it, so I enjoy this. I wash my sink, I wash my hands, I use soap, then I sanitize my sink and I sanitize my handles of the soap bottle and the handles of the sink. I use Lysol spray, Clorox wipes, everything. So I'm just adding this little clip in there for those people that are concerned about washing your meat and contaminating everything around you. So I use a paper towel to blot off the meat. And yes, after doing this, I do wash my hands again, but I don't have that on video. Actually, my hands stay pretty dry because I washed them so many times during the cooking process, but that's just how it has to be. So here are our two steaks that I have dried off. So now I'm going to add some oil. I'm using grapeseed oil, but you could definitely use olive oil or avocado oil. Now I'm adding my liquid smoke. I'm just adding these seasonings to one side, and then I'm going to massage them into both sides. And if I need to add more on the second side, then I'll do it. So I'm just adding my seasonings generously because it's going to be spread out on both sides of the steak. And we're actually going to let the seasonings sit or marinate on our steak for a good 10 to 15 minutes while we prep our other ingredients. If you can do this the night before, it definitely will be tasty, but at least 5 or 10 minutes will still impart some of the extra flavor that you want in your final dish. This will also let these steaks come closer to room temperature before we actually pan fry them, which is really important. You never want to take a steak straight out the refrigerator into your frying pan. So with a gloved hand, I am spreading the seasoning on both sides of the steak. So the second side looked like it needed a little bit more seasoning. I just eyeball it. I'm pretty liberal with my seasonings except for the ones that contain a lot of sodium or the actual salt itself. I'd rather add a little salt in the beginning and cook it, and then if I need more salt while eating it, then I add it at that point. Look at that, beautiful, and it smells so good, y'all. So now it's time to prep our vegetables. These are fancy green beans that are microwavable. The bag says it's pre-washed, but I have trust issues, so I wash my own vegetables anyway. I bought this bag because the green beans did look a lot better in the bag than the ones that were just sitting on the produce shelf. So I'm going to give them a quick rinse. You can absolutely add vinegar or a vegetable wash to wash your vegetables beforehand. Now I'm going to wash my grape tomatoes. Grape tomatoes are very similar to cherry tomatoes, but they're just a little bit bigger, more oblong, basically the shape of a grape, hence the name grape tomatoes. These happen to be on sale, so that's why I purchased these. I use white vinegar to clean my vegetables, so I'm just going to drizzle some on and let it sit for a couple of minutes and then give it a rinse. Tomatoes are delicious raw, but the flavor actually intensifies when you cook them. So even though this bag looked pretty good, I've had it a couple of days, so some of the ends have started to brown. So what I'm going to do is just use a knife to snip off the smallest piece as possible. Only what's discolored is what I'm snipping off. That's the reason why I'm not breaking them by hand. I just want to get the brown part off. And now I'm going to slice my grape tomatoes in half. You can just take your time and do this because they're round and wet, so you don't want them to move around and you cut yourself. So I'm just slicing them in half lengthwise. Look at them, they're so beautiful. They look like little pieces of red candy. So before we cook our vegetables, I'm actually going to blanch the green beans, which means I'm going to bring a pot of water with salt up to a boil. While that's getting to a boil, I'm going to add oil to my cast iron skillet for my steaks. So now that my water, you can see it's starting to bubble, I'm going to add my green beans in there just to cook for a minute or two. This will help them soften up quickly. I'm not going to bother with an ice bath. Now that my pan is hot for my steak, I'm going to add my steak to the pan. Look at how beautiful this steak is. I like to add a little bit of red wine vinegar for the acidity. You could also add half a tablespoon of butter to each steak. I don't cook this based on time. It may be about 5 minutes to 7 minutes. Use a meat thermometer to bring your meat up to the temperature you desire. And remember, it continues to cook after you take it off of the heat. Now I'm going to make my green beans. So I'm adding my blanched green beans into a hot wok. This wok also has some grapeseed oil in it. And I'm going to give the green beans a stir. I'm going to add some of the same seasonings that we used for our steak to continue the same flavor profile throughout. Here I'm using light salt since I used seasoning salt on the steak. This is coconut aminos. Look at the beautiful char on these steaks from the cast iron skillet. It is absolutely beautiful. You'll notice though that it is not all the way cooked in the center. There's still some pink. So you want to use a meat thermometer to make sure it is a temperature that you like. I do hold the steak on its side to help sear it on the side to cook it through a little bit more. Look at how juicy it is. And then when you sit it on the plate and let it rest for about 10 minutes, the juices will evenly distribute and it will continue to cook a little bit more. Look at the char on the green beans. I guess I just like charred food. That adds a lot of flavor. So now I'm going to add in my sliced tomatoes. And we're going to add a little bit more of the seasonings. It's important to season at every level. So you don't want to overdo it at any one point because the tomatoes need seasoning, the green beans, as well as the steak. So in a wok, you want to keep your food moving around. And you're going to cook it until you notice the tomatoes are cooked through. And look at that, y'all. If you wanted this to be a vegetarian dish, it absolutely could be. You could serve these green beans and tomatoes with a side of rice or noodles. I, of course, decided to add a steak on top. Look at that, y'all. It was so juicy, so tender, and so flavorful. The garlic, the onion, the coconut aminos adds a delicious touch of sweetness. You definitely want to make this for a delicious low-carb meal. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel and share this video with your friends that you think may be interested.